Am I worthy of feeling joy anymore? Am I worthy of living anymore? The cruelty you endure by the hands of perhaps the COs or your fellow prisoners. It all comes back to the fact that you're behind the wall, you're part of the system now, and you're a cog in that system. This process of eliminating your core being from who you are is something that a person will confront each and every day that they wake up in the cell and the bar shut behind them. Greetings and salutations, I'm Victor Sorti and welcome to my channel, 28 to Persevere. Thanks for watching. Today's video we're going to talk about man's inhumanity to his fellow man and the desensitization process that one person goes through throughout his time incarcerated. In prison, you're going to learn quickly that cruelty in and of itself is unfettered, unbound, and completely and utterly callous. There isn't anything really that you can emphasize enough when you talk about the cruelty that you'll be enduring in prison. To the average Joe or Jane that perhaps is completely and utterly indifferent to a person's fate once they go to prison, being that, as it may, in their eyes they might have deserved their fate in general, is completely and utterly oblivious to the reality that also this type of cruelty and this type of desensitization that they go through, this process, has ramifications long after the man is released from incarceration. Something to keep in mind, because in this life that we live, each and every fellow traveler on this pathway that we're all on, this journey, their actions and ramifications of their actions are felt by us in some form or fashion. I'm very conscientious of the fact that we are all a unit in a sense, singular and so different. But in the same token, we're of the general society that in prison, once you get back into that society, you take with you all the baggage, all the garbage, and all the cruelty, and all the pain, and the struggle, and the suffering, the torture that you endured all those years incarcerated. I'm not reaching out to anyone to express a hope that a person would be sympathetic or look upon us with pity. That is sure as shit what I'm not doing. I look at pity as an insult to a large extent. I never wanted anyone's pity or really anybody to sit there and feel sorry for me or the next man that's incarcerated. The vast majority of men in prison know why they're there, and they pay their penance and they pay the price for their actions every day. And they struggle with their own demons. The vast majority of them are consumed by them. But one thing I want you to keep in mind is a quote that I'm about to reiterate in length, and just bear with me for a minute. It's by author Schopenhauer, but it's really relevant and pertinent to what we're discussing here today. All right, and I quote, "The conduct of men towards one another is characterized as a rule by injustice, extreme unfairness, hardiness, and an even cruelty. An opposite course of conduct appears only by way of exception. The necessity for the state and for legislation rests on this fact." That quote by Arthur Schopenhauer is so relevant. Granted that he wrote that centuries ago, but in today's day and age, especially behind the walls of the prison system, its relevance speaks for itself. I mean, every day you're living that. And you're antagonized, and your antagonists are the legislative body, are the system, the cruelty you endure by the hands of perhaps the COs or your fellow prisoners. It all comes back to the fact that you're behind the wall, you're part of the system now, and you're a cog in that system. And as a cog, you're expected to just go with the cycle and the motion of the times to keep the system running. You're like fuel for that system. And you start to lose your sense of humanity, your sense of your empathy with your fellow man. And that process, the dehumanization process, completely and utterly desensitizes a lot of men in prison. You lose touch with your base instincts of compassion, to feeling that you can relate to the next person on an emotional level, where you find the sensitive nature of people something that you can embrace and identify with. You start to lose that sense of identification. So keep this in mind. I realize that the capacity to feel pain on a deeply emotional and spiritual and psychological level increases with your knowledge of where that pain is deriving from and who or what is causing it. You start to think to yourself, okay, how can I get rid of this pain? How can I nullify what I'm feeling inside me based on the external elements around me that I believe are directly resulting in why I'm feeling the way I feel each and every day of my life? When you're in prison, you look for that scapegoat in a sense. So you try to find an outlet. You try to find some form or fashion that will give you the means to an end to alleviate this type of pain that you feel inside you. And what you do then is you start feeding into the process, the desensitization process. This process is a process where you're dealing with the external factions and factors around you. The factions being various guards, your fellow prisoners, the way the system is run each day, the noise, the insults, the way you feel denigrated and desecrated, the things you find most sacred in your life stripped from you. You feel that you're going through this deplorable process of dehumanization, something that you have to comprehend and accept, and you never truly accept it. You might endure, you'll persevere, you'll feel inside you an inner rage or strength, whatever it is to get you through that moment in that day. But you start to also become bitter and enraged by the process, constantly being insulted, people talking down to you, never really talking to you, but at you in a sense. Your opinion is meaningless to anyone that's not wearing the same uniform as you, being that in New York State, it's the state greens that everybody wore, the fellow prisoners. So you start to really lose your sense of belonging. It's something greater than what's going on right now inside the walls of that prison that you're living in, this world of concrete, steel, asphalt, and iron, and dirt. So it's something that you keep in mind every day, and you try not to lose your sense of belonging and your sense of humanity. But it's easier said than done. I see men that went into prison and they were borderline jovial. I mean, very talkative, outgoing, a little bit, too much so at times, and trying to adapt to it and accept it, but then try to convert others into their way of thinking. And then slowly through the process of dehumanization and desensitization, I've seen those same men lose it mentally, emotionally, lose touch with themselves on a psychological level. And I've seen them fall astray, being led astray by the world around them and giving power to it beyond their own initiatives. Because you realize the power that's around you. You realize the forces of negativity, the chaos that's all around you every day, and how insane that process is, and how a man can lose his mind within that process. Your sanity is the insanity around you, and that might be complex for the average mind to wrap around, but that complexity is how you live every day. What's insane to the next person, especially beyond the wall, is just your everyday life. It's the lifestyle, the prison experience, and how you live it. So in prison, you understand this process and you try to stay calm and collected and as cool as you can be. But you also know that each and every day you grow a little bit bitter, a little bit colder. You belong to a select group of individuals where callousness and cruelty becomes the standard every day you see around you. You try to hold on to the aspects of your life that you did find sacred, the kindness that you had in your heart for your loved ones, and the friendship and camaraderie you had with your kinfolk in general, or kith and kin, or as it may be. You understand that that connection that you had can be severed, and it is slowly being frayed at the seams. You're just holding on. You're holding on to it the best you can. But you look at prison and this process of eliminating your core being from who you are is something that a person will confront each and every day that they wake up in the cell and the bar's shut behind them. They lie back on their bed. They put the arms behind their head and look up at the ceiling and see the painting chips that are peeling from the wall, or perhaps a cockroach or two crawling around, or a rat or a mouse on the floor from the bars coming through the gallery. running rampant around block, and you think to yourself, this is the standard of your life now. It's depressing and dank, but it's also something that if you don't get a handle on to overcome it, you will become as dank and desolate as your cell on so many levels. You'll lose your spiritual essence. Any type of faith you had, anything's more powerful than your own immediate wants and needs, will be going at the wayside of everything that you ever believed in. And then you'll lose your sense of bearings, your foundation, to keep your principles in check, your virtues, your sense of nobility, honor, principles that to the average Joe or Jane might seem foreign to a prisoner, but in actuality, it holds truly dear. A lot of the men that I knew and I was closest to, we did have a code of honor and ethics that we abided by with our every waking breath. I truly believed in it, and I wish to instill that in my children and my wife and help them along their own journey through life's experiences, which far different than my own behind the wall. But the principles that I just spoke about, they're noble virtues, and instilling them in others, even behind the wall, is a process in and of itself. Because in prison, the callous nature of it is more respected than somebody who walks around with a principled state of mind on the average. But there are those that do honor that and acknowledge it and wish to emulate it in their own ways, even if it's to live vicariously through your actions, as you be the leader of whatever it is you're presenting, that type of characteristic and that mannerisms. They define you, and you allow yourself to go with that and be the man that you're capable of being, even behind the horrors and the wall that you're living in, which is the prison system, where in that type of environment, the machismo is off the charts. Everybody's sticking their chest out and fronting and walking around, and, tough Tony. But in reality, it's also, there's a lot of fear in prison. There's a lot of insecurities. There's cowardice on a high level. I've always looked at people where there's a lot of bullying in prison. And I always looked at the bully as the ultimate coward, because he's of his own inadequacies and insecurities. He's trying to compensate that by insulting or hurting another. That's truly the essence of a bully. And I saw that, and at times I would speak up against that, which was going around rampant in prison. I mean, it really was. But the reality is it's all around you, and those that are subjected to it, a lot of victims become victimizers. They become hardened by the elements and the people. I mean, there are times when I was growing up in the prison system, early 20s into my 30s and 40s, and I was going through the process itself, the dehumanization process. And at first I went into prison wide-eyed and, completely flabbergasted at the reality surrounding me every day. And I slowly become hardened by the times and the people around me. And I knew my disposition had to be of such that I was like granite. You're just walking around hard as all can be, on a mental, emotional level. And I made my body strong, the physicality of living that type of life, hitting the iron every day and doing what I needed to do to present myself in such a fashion that the elements would not destroy me, but it would create a wall within me. And you don't realize at the time the dehumanization process that is happening inside you. There are times where, my temperament, I realized was, if left unchecked, would get the best of me, and it would destroy me eventually, because there's always something bigger and badder than you, that's for sure. And the reality is, in prison, when you're going through this process, you don't know it. You're completely oblivious to the dehumanization process, becoming desensitized to the world around you. For what the average Joe or Jane can empathize with or relate to is completely foreign to you, completely alien to your sensibilities now and how you live your life. And I knew this, later on in my bid, and I really held on to the things I valued, the principles I had, because I knew that if I lost them, I would lose myself, and there's no coming back from that. People could talk a good game and how, I ain't intimidated by this, or I'm doing that, and I'm going to confront this in this fashion. But it changes you. And, prison in general, the person you are going in isn't the person you will be when you go home. It's two different worlds, and you're going to morph into something to survive that you never knew you were capable of morphing into, be good or bad. It's the reality of the times. And I tried to hold on to some core principles because I understood that eventually I was going to get out of prison, and I was determined to do so. I understood that there was so much more to this life than the wall that I was behind, 30-foot wall. I lived my life every day, secluded in that hellhole that was the prison system. But as I knew that when reality was something that I was going to embrace beyond the wall, I made sure that I kept my cool and my wits and did the things I needed to do every day. And I understood that every day was an insult to me. I understood that I woke up every day and it's easy to feel shame and regret, and that could destroy a person's sense of self-worth. And I tried to hold on to that the best I could because I understood that the majority of men that lost themselves in prison, first thing they lost was their sense of self-worth. If you feel worthless, the world around you is meaningless. And if life has no meaning, then what is the purpose of your own? So I really held on to that sense of worthfulness, sense of self, because the life is discovery, and what you learn out of it, and what lessons it teaches you, it's fickle in a sense, as fate is. They teach you these harsh lessons, but you have to go through the harshness first to understand the lesson. You have to experience the pain before you understand the pleasure of what you just learned, and how beneficial that might be for you in whatever it is your life journey is, and where it takes you. I remember this one time where I felt compelled to talk someone that I was very tight with off the ledge, so to speak. There was a guy that I knew quite well. We spent many, many years together in the Auburn Correctional Facility, and he was going through a really, really, really rough patch. He was going through a lot of horrific shit that he had to deal with in prison, and trying to contend with that. And he was enduring a lot of hardships that his family was suffering through beyond the wall that he was incapable of alleviating. And I remember speaking with him, and he was elaborating to me how he's basically given up on himself and of ever getting out of prison. He didn't have a life sentence, but he had a long time to do. And thank the gods he's home now and doing quite well for himself and supporting his family. And the reality was, at the time, we were both in our early 20s, and this guy was going through a really rough patch. And, I just was watching him decline mentally and emotionally. And he would isolate himself for long stretches of time in his cell. He wouldn't come out. He wouldn't go to the yard. He wouldn't go out to work out. He was really losing touch with himself. So I felt compelled to reach out to him and to try to speak to him to see if he was willing to share what he's going through with me. I felt that a person in prison can really begin to think to themselves, because in their mindset, they were flushed from the bowels of society as a piece of shit, basically. Now to live among the rest of the sewage and the dumping ground of humanity that is prison. And they start to lose their sense of, wait a second, am I even human? Am I worthy of human emotions? And can I control those emotions? Um, am I worthy of feeling joy anymore? Am I worthy of living anymore? And this guy who I was very close to, spoke with me and basically expressed that sentiment, that he was no longer willing to continue with his life and continue enduring the suffering, the struggle, and to emphasize to him how precious his life was and is. The reality is, you have to endure and understand that endurance is what you are contending with in the moment, and it's not going to be forever. You have to endure the moment. You're going to get out, and you're going to become greater than where you stand and sit right now, and you have to be ready for that opportunity when it presents itself. And that struggle that you're feeling inside you right now is a feeling. It doesn't define you, but how you respond to it will. Especially if you're contemplating taking your own life, which he was. He wanted to cop some drugs and OD in his cell, basically what he told me. And I sure as shit wasn't going to let that happen to him. And I made sure nobody would sell him the drugs. That wasn't happening. But I spoke to him, and him and I shared uh, the emotions of the moment. I expressed about my mental state, the things I was going through. It wasn't all hunky dory to me either. I was struggling with accepting my fate, my reality at that point in my bid. I was starting to believe that I was never going to get out of prison. So I was really adapted to the world around me every day. I wasn't no longer thinking that there was a life possible beyond the wall, but I didn't lose sight of that life being a possibility. That sounds contradictory. It most certainly was, because I was living a life of conflict on so many levels, as this man was also. But he was a brother of mine, and he still is. And lo and behold, he shared the intimate details of what he was going through, and the struggle and the suffering, the torture that he was feeling inside him on an emotional, spiritual, psychological, and even physical level. And thankfully, he didn't step over the ledge. He didn't fall into the abyss. I got him to go out to the pit with me, hit the iron. I became a reliable, loyal workout partner of mine for many, many years. And as I stated previously, I look upon him as one of my brothers. But that's the hardships of prison. People don't realize the mental state of most men incarcerated, what they're going through, and how that affects them, and adversely affects their families as well. But that I'll never forget that opportunity that presented itself to me to reach out to someone that was a fellow traveler that lost his way, to get him back in sync, understanding the pathway that was laid out before him, was including him in it, and how important it was for him to continue down that road. Wherever it may lead, you don't know. Nobody knows their true fate. But you build character along the way, and you confront your demons and the hardships and the realities that you must confront and endure. And sooner or later, that pathway is going to have an opportunity for you to reach out and branch out, become greater than the moment, because you embraced it and you survived it, and now you're something greater than what you previously were in your mindset. And that's what basically it comes down to, a mindset, where you stand and sit and how you confront that mindset. In prison, you become lost in the dehumanization process, and you struggle with your demons every day. It's hard to be a standard bearer of principles and the faith that you're confronting every day when you realize the life you live around you is something that is going to take you in different directions. You can't just sit there and walk around as if you're living a just life inside you, and your principles and the world around you doesn't affect you because you're aloft to it. The reality is, it is going to affect you in more ways than one. You're going to go through various stages, as I spoke about in a previous video about depression and despair, and now we speak in detail about the dehumanization and desensitization that you feel inside you every day through living the life that you live. Everyone's affected by it, the strong, the weak. It comes in various stages that you're going to confront, and some overcome it, some are consumed by it. I believe in what it is that it takes a person to delve into, that the reserves of strength that a person has inside them. I believe we all have it, where it reveals itself that it's in various forms and fashions, in various walks of life. Each individual is an individual in and of itself, and their life experience is strictly their own, and they confront it and contend within their own fashion. Mine happened to be through the prison system, through that experience, growing up there, dealing with what I dealt with, knowing who I knew, and being the man I was capable of being, and doing what was necessary to survive. There were times, as I stated before, I wasn't worried about doing the right thing or even the wrong thing. I was just focused on doing the only thing that it would matter for me to survive that moment. Whatever it entailed me to do, I would do it to survive, without being exploited or becoming a liability to others around me. I understood that you needed to lead by example and be a standard bearer to a large extent in how you carried yourself, for others to follow your lead, to understand that where you're going with your mindset is far beyond the wall. You're thinking about tomorrow, though you're focusing on today, because you understand that to be a better person, You can't completely be consumed by the world around you, though there are moments in that world where you're going to do some things that you might regretfully have to do. Maybe violently, you have to confront a situation in a fashion that requires a physical force, because talking or being calm, cool, and collected just isn't going to work, especially if your life is in jeopardy and someone wants to physically harm you bodily. So it's something that you understand, and as I said, you try to become a standard bearer and present yourself in a fashion that's not arrogantly um, so, but confidently so, that a person can see you and say, okay, this guy's trying to get his shit together. Um, let's see where he's going with this. Some people look down at people like that. They think they're arrogant or whatever it is. But then there are the vast majority who say to themselves, okay, here's someone that is unwilling to bend to the whims of the state and to become another useless cog uh, that's completely worn out, used and abused by the system, and spit out into the world where it's most likely he will reoffend, and the recidivism rate, as high as it is throughout the country, indicates so, that the vast majority of men feel when they are released because of the hardships they endure while incarcerated. It's really hard. It's really hard to accept that you're becoming dehumanized. You're losing touch with your better nature, and you can go through your entire prison sentence and not even realize this until you come home, and then you look upon the next man or woman for that fashion, and you can't relate to either one of them. You're just like in your own world, man. The only world you can relate to is the world that you just left behind, and that's horrific. For anyone that has to live like that, uh, my heart goes out to them, because I understand the hardships. I understand the struggle to reacquaint yourself with the world beyond the wall, adapt to the average Joe or Jane's mentality. Though it might be foreign to sensibilities to you, you learn to understand that you have so much more in common than you do different. So it's important to understand this, and it's important to know that a person that's doing time, uh, they're going through it in their own way, and they're trying to hold on. The ones that don't, sometimes just lost cause and lost cause. I mean, there's some people that never come back from it. Some people go home, but they're never truly free. They're still incarcerated inside their head. They're living that mentality every day, and that's a horror show that never ends. And there were times and moments upon my release where I would struggle. I would struggle with adapting to the ebb and flow of everyday life. I mean, I've only been out a little bit less than 3 years, and there are still moments where I have to take a step back and, like, a little in awe of the reality around me right now. The ebbs and flows of everyday life are something that can be awe-inspiring, but even intimidating to a person that lived an institutional way of living every day, where routine is fundamental to everything they did, and how they adapted to the norm of everyday mentality that they confronted, which isn't the mentality they confronted in the world, thankfully, beyond the wall. And not that you accept the reality you dealt with, but it is the reality you dealt with. And you have to define yourself to the extent of how you adapted to that reality. And now you have to be entirely different in the way you respond to the reality that is unfolded beyond the wall. So the dehumanization process is something that you acknowledge. You say, okay. And there are moments where I'll come home and I'll appreciate a blue sky, or I'll sit on the back porch and just listen to the birds and be grateful that I'm in this moment and embracing this opportunity that I have to do such a thing. Uh, because if I would have lost my sense of being sensitive to that, then I would have lost myself. And in prison, a lot of guys do lose themselves. So it's important to get this, engraved into the psyche of people that are trying to wonder whether or not their loved one is going through it, and how they're going to be when they come home. It's a process of patience and understanding. With that being said, thanks for watching. Press that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm Victor Sorti. Thanks for watching my channel, Train to Persevere. Until next time, go with the gods, persevere.